We have with us Soumyadeep Mukherjee, a PhD student at IIT Kanpur, who has been involved for quite some time with astrophotography. And if you want to see some cool images, so you can visit the platforms like NASA, APOD, Earth, Sky, Space, Weather, etc., where his images are being published. And uh, without much further ado, we will start our workshop. The stage is over to you, Swamyadeep. You can start with the presentation.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sadha, for the introduction. And I welcome you all to this. I don't know if I should say this as a workshop, but it's going to be more of a sharing my experience with all of you for those who are interested in the thing called astrophotography. I hope that you're going to get benefited with this. I have been astrophotographing very coincidentally. Today actually marks my 1 year into the journey of this astrophotography. Exactly 1 year back, I started photographing the sky. And thanks to the lockdown, of course, thanks to the lockdown that it all began. So over the last 1 year, I've learned something, how to do things, and it's a steep learning curve. I mean, as like any other genre of photography, it's a steep learning curve. You get to know things as you move with your experience and all. I'm gonna pause the video because I do not have much trust on my internet connection. So we're gonna just have the presentation over an audio and the screen, of course. All right. So, and Saad, if there is any glitch in between, just stop me and let me know if you
Sure,
can't hear me. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So here it is. What is astrophotography? I mean, what do we mean when we say we are doing astrophotography? It's basically a merge of two words. We're taking astronomy and photography, and we're blending it together to find astrophotography. So it's basically photographing the sky, the celestial objects in the sky, and whatever there is in the sky, including clouds. Of course, I mean, it's not a very popular thing to consider a lot of things within astrophotography other than celestial objects, but if you want, a lot of things can come under astrophotography. But thanks to our sun, we don't see many things in the sky when the sun is there. So it's basically the night sky which we focus on. At night, there are a lot of things. It's a hell lot of things that goes on in the sky. So it's the best time to do astrophotography. So basically, for the 90% of the time, we do astrophotography at night. But we can also do astrophotography in daylight. I'll come in details later on what kind of things that we can shoot in broad daylight when the sun is up. But yeah, we can do it at both night and during the day. Now, what is the most intriguing thing about astrophotography? For me, personally, I find the most intriguing and the interesting thing about astrophotography is we capture what is invisible to our naked eye. Say, for example, a nebula. We know a nebula is there in the sky. We know that there are innumerable galaxies there in the sky, but we don't get to see them with our naked eyes. But when we are using our camera, okay, so when I'm referring to the term camera, I mean both phone and DSLR. When I have to, mention them, mention DSLR only, I'll mention it as DSLR. When I'm mentioning camera, it's both DSLR and a phone. So yeah, astrophotography is for most of the time you're capturing the invisible, unless even if we consider Milky Way, which is a huge takes a huge portion in our sky. it's also invisible unless you're going in a very dark sky and you can see the Milky Way. But if you're from a moderately light polluted area, you cannot see the Milky Way. So it's for most of the part it's invisible. Now, the question that I have asked myself a lot of times, and I've asked many astrophotographers a lot of time, is uh, astrophotography a science, since there is astronomy, or it's a form of art, since it's photography? But the thing that I have finalized, I mean, when I take images, it's a mixture of both. I mean, there are certain images which is more artistic than it holds a scientific value. But then there are some images which has scientific value and there is not much of an art involved in that image. So it depends on what you're imaging. And for those who are pretty interested in science, yes, you can do a lot of things from your backyard or from your rooftop. Just for an example, uh, just last month there was a comet which hit Jupiter, and this was captured by an amateur astronomer or astrophotographer from Brazil. And then he went on and shared his video or some images in social media, and then the world got to know about it. So yeah, you can do a lot of science with your amateur data. Now, what are the things that we can capture? Of course, so we can capture Milky Way. There are star trails that we can capture, sun, the moon. There are some planets. With our amateur setup, we are limited. We cannot capture Neptune and Uranus, and Mercury is also very difficult. But with a very humble setup, you can easily capture, say, Jupiter, Mars. Not right now, but during opposition, Mars, Saturn, Venus, these four planets. And of course, there are a number of galaxies and nebula and star clusters. Now, when you decide that, okay, I'm going to do astrophotography, I'm going to capture the night sky, what do I need? What do I need to do that? It could be you can begin with as simple as a phone and a DSLR. I'll be assuming that a lot of you would just have your phone with you and not a DSLR. Yes, you can do it with your phone itself. And I'll show you some examples later on that you can do amazing with your phone. And if you're using a DSLR, of course, you need a lens. Now, there are, a number of lenses that you can use, starting from very basic lens, like the kit lenses that you get when you buy your DSLR. Like for Nikon shooters, you get an 1855, a 7300. For Canon people, you get a 1855 and 55-250. Sorry, I'm not a Canon shooter, so pardon me if I'm wrong. So you can start with this. Even if you just have one lens, you can capture something with that. And the most important thing is a tripod. You may have a phone, you may have a DSLR and lens, but if you do not have a tripod, you're going to face some issues. Why is that? Because when in daylight we do say wildlife, say street photography, landscape, portraits, we take very fast shutters. For wildlife, we take 1/4000, 1/2000. For any other, we take, say, around, we don't go less than, say, 130. So in order to avoid the shake of the camera. But in astrophotography, the goal is to capture as much as light possible. In order to do that, we need longer exposures. We take exposures starting from anywhere from 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It may go up to 10, 20 minutes. So to keep your phone or your DSLR steady for that duration, you need a tripod and a sturdy one, because you don't want a shaky tripod that is going to shake even with the slightest of the wind. That's going to ruin the complete image, and you don't want that. So a sturdy tripod is what we need. And of course, when we say astrophotography, the first thing that comes to our mind is telescope. But it's a very popular thing to among people is to do astrophotography. You need expensive equipment, you need expensive telescopes. No, some of you may have some telescopes with you. You can use that. If you do not have a telescope, that's fine. You can think of buying one if you're really interested. And there are a number of the telescopes come in different sizes, from very small that you can fit into your bag, and something which you need a truck to carry. So you can have one if you want, but you can of course start with without a telescope. As we say in astrophotography, rather than say if you're investing 100 rupees in your equipment, out of that 100 rupees, 60 rupees should go into a good equatorial mount. Why is that? What does an equatorial mount do? So the Earth rotates, right? So the sky also rotates along with it. I mean, from our perspective. So when we are taking a long exposure, the object that you're photographing would tend to move from one side to the other, of course, from east to west. What an equatorial mount does is it counters the rotation of the Earth. So your object always stays in your frame. So you fit an equatorial mount on your tripod, and then you fit your phone or your DSLR onto it, and then you track. So tracking is basically when the tracker is moving your equipment, whatever equipment that you're using, and that lets you take longer exposures. And since we take multiple images of the same object, why I'll come to that. So we might need an intervalometer or maybe a shutter release button, which helps you not to touch your camera and allow to operate from your this intervalometer. And then if you're very advanced, then you can go to a lot of things like an dedicated astro camera, full spectrum camera. There are a large array of filters, broadband, narrowband, etc. But we're not going to go into that today. Now, in order to do photography, of course, you need to know your phone or camera. Any kind of photography you need to know. Now, when we start photography, we tend to start with the auto mode. But the auto mode, it's simply not going to work at night, because the camera, the auto mode mainly depends on the metering of your camera, be it matrix metering or be it point metering, but it's not going to work for at night. So you have to switch to manual mode or pro mode, whatever it says in your brand or in your phone. Next, we need to know what a shutter speed is. It's the amount of time the sensor is exposed. So like I mentioned previously, we need to gather as much as light or photons in order to, because these objects are pretty faint. So we, capture as much as we can. And to do that, we take long exposures. Then comes aperture. Aperture is, of course, the amount of light that you allow to hit your sensor. Your lens has an aperture. In a wide aperture, say f1.8, f2, you gather a lot of light, and with every one stop, you increase the f number, you get the half data. So, for example, the amount of light you gather in f1.8, you capture the half of that amount in say f2.8. So it's not 2.8, I guess. Yeah, it's 2.8. So we need a good aperture to get shorter exposures and to gather more light. And of course, ISO is the sensitivity of your camera sensor. So if you are taking, say, the more the ISO, the more sensitive it becomes. But we tend to avoid putting the ISO much higher because it introduces a lot of noise. So we try to keep it bare minimum, say 200 or 400. And of course, probably the most tricky thing to decide is the focal length. It completely depends on, not completely depends on one thing, but a number of things, like the object that you're shooting. So for example, if you're shooting Milky Way, it's a huge thing in the sky. So you need a wide angle lens. Say the wider you go, the better it is. Say 10 mm or maybe 18 mm or something like that. Now, if you're capturing a planet, you need more focal length because the objects are very small. You can go up to say 5,000 mm or even more than that. So you have to decide your focal length based on the object that you're shooting, and of course, the gears that you have, the lenses that you have, also limits the kind of object that you can shoot. Now coming to the types of astrophotography. Now there are some subgenres within astrophotography. They are not very there is not a very watertight distinction among them, but they are popularly we categorize them in some. So the first one, probably the most popular one, is nightscape, which is basically Milky Way. Along with the landscape, this here I don't have a landscape because I'm shooting from a city. It would come horrible, but I hope you get the idea of what a nightscape is. So basically, it's a landscape at night. So when you're shooting landscape at night, of course, you do not want your sky to be pitch black. So you want something. Milky Way is the answer and our go-to thing. Then deepscape is a pretty popular, I won't say no, it's rather not a very popular subgenre, but it's very newly introduced in the Western countries. This is basically a deep sky object along with a foreground. And some of you might, we also, including me, we do not have much idea of how large an object is. So the image that you're seeing is a coconut palm tree, and on top of that is the Andromeda galaxy. At night sky, Andromeda galaxy is actually 6 times larger than a full moon. We don't realize that just because we can't see them. And this is taken in a very, rather a moderate focal length that is just 100 mm. So this is something that you can try, but it's still not very popular. Then we come to the most popular thing is the deep sky. Here, this is an open cluster called the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters. In deep sky, we shoot a number of things like nebula. For example, Pleiades also contains a planetary nebula, or rather a reflection nebula. Then we shoot other nebulas like emission nebulas, dark nebulas, galaxies, and star clusters. Then, of course, there is planetary, where we shoot the planets. This is Mars. Like I said, you can imagine how small it is. Like this, if I remember correctly, this Mars image was taken at a focal length of 600 mm, and the Pleiades was taken at 300 mm. So you can just see how large actually these objects are, the deep sky objects. Then, of course, two popular are lunar and solar. For solar, you need some dedicated equipments, and it's very dangerous. I'll come to this at the end of this presentation. But of course, solar is one of my favorite thing to do, and this is what I eventually started with. Then we have a number of optical phenomena. They include a lot of things. They include, say, halos. They include a number of arcs, rainbows, different types of clouds. This is a solar halo, and you can see a contrail passing through it. This was taken last month. And then there are celestial events like conjunctions or near conjunctions. So some of you might remember last year we had the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. They came very close. Now they're far apart. If you can see closely, this is of course the moon, and this is a lunar corona, which is also an optical phenomenon. On the left, you can see this is the Jupiter. And where is Saturn? Yeah, this is Saturn. It's very small because it was shot at 35 mm. But three of these celestial objects, they came in a near conjunction position. So this is a celestial event. Now, we got the idea of what astrophotography is, uh, what we need to do astrophotography, what are the objects that we can do astrophotography. Now, how are you going to do astrophotography? For that, there are three main elements of photographing the sky. The first one is planning, the second one is shooting, and the third one, and a very important one, and probably the most difficult one, is processing. All right. So now we come to planning. The first criteria of astrophotography is to know the sky. Since you can't see these objects with your naked eyes, at least most of them, you need to know how to identify the constellations, how to identify the stars or the planets. The best way, and thanks to this age of internet and multimedia, there are a number of applications, planetarium applications that you can download on your phone. I've listed some of them, like Skyview, Mobile Observatory, Stellarium, Skywalk. All of these work for Android. Stellarium works for iOS, but you can find if there are more. So with this pointed at the sky, there is some apps among these also have an augmented reality camera. So you can switch on your camera, point it at a part of the sky, and on your mobile screen, you're shown what object is there, or what deep sky object, what constellation, what star is there. But when you're planning to shoot something, you have to know the relation of seasons and the object. So for example, if I want to shoot Orion, if I want to shoot Orion, I cannot shoot it in the month of, say, March, May, April, June, or July, because it's simply not there at the night sky. If I want to shoot Orion, I have to, at least now, today is 2nd of October, I have to wait till around 11 o'clock at night until the Orion rises from the east. So it depends. The Milky Way session is about to end. You're not going to get Milky Way, at least the galactic core in winter, but you get the winter arm, also known as the Orion arm. So when you're planning to shoot something, of course, you have to know that if the object is at all there, or there is no point in shooting, say, something which sets with the sun or stays in the night sky for 20 minutes. There is no point of shooting that. The other important thing is to know the moon phase. Unless you're shooting the moon itself, moon is probably the dreaded enemy of astrophotography, because it washes away all the objects. You can't see them even with your camera. So you have to know the moon phase. The best time is to shoot deep sky objects, especially, is 1 week before and after of the new moon. So if you're planning to go somewhere to a dark sky or to some area to photograph, you have to consider all of this. And you also need to consider the sky condition, that is light pollution. So for example, I live in a metro city, in an urban city, which is in the bottle scale, it's bottle 9. But if you're living, say, in a suburb area or in a rural area or in a hilltop, you're blessed. You're going to get dark sky. And with light pollution comes the hurdle of a number of issues that crop up into your images. So the best sky is the dark sky. There is no replacement of a dark sky. And also you need to consider the weather condition. For example, clouds. If there are clouds, it's a good night for you. There is no way you can shoot. And like I said, dark sky is the best sky. So you need to find a location. If there are some websites like which will show you the light pollution, which will give you a map of the light pollution. If there are some areas, say 10 kilometers away from your home, which is away from street lights and all, you can go there. Now, of course, you have to, like I mentioned, you have to choose the right gear. So if you're photographing a large object in the sky, you have to choose a wide field. It can go anywhere from to 18 to 18,000 mm, but it depends on your object. And there are some websites. If time allows, I can show you at the end how I frame my objects with the help of telescope here. So basically, it's a website where you put in your focal length, you name the object, and you give your camera details, and it shows you how the object would appear in your camera. If you're, it's a very common practice to do to photograph the transits of ISS or Hubble. So there are websites which will take your location and will tell you if there is a transit coming up. You can keep checking for celestial events. There are all these magazines like Astronomy, Sky and Telescope, BBC. They publish a lot of articles on their website with details on how you can capture any upcoming celestial event. So you can check that. If you're going out, it may sound very funny, but it's very important. I mean, I have faced it a number of times that I've set up my things and all. And the moment I started capturing, it showed low battery. So you would really want to avoid that. And if you're going to a location, to somewhere outside of your backyard or rooftop, you might want to take some extra batteries and power bank if you have some other gadgets to use and memory card. Now comes the interesting thing, the shooting. The first thing is to, of course, to set up your gear, to set up your tripod in a sturdy, in a very clean area. If you have an equatorial mount, you would want to polar align that, attach your lens and on. Now, autofocusing doesn't work at night. So you have to frame a bright star. I use Jupiter to frame things, to focus, and then you focus manually. Then there are some focusing aids like Bartinov mask, which you can use to help you focus. Then probably the toughest thing to do while shooting is to frame. Again, you can take the help of a planetarium app. You can mark a bright star which you can see with your naked eye, and then frame your object. Even with the help of telescopiers. So, for example, if you're trying to shoot the Orion area, the 4 nebulas that we have, Orion, Running Man, we have Horsehead and Fleming Nebula, and the IC78. No, it's M78. Sorry. So if you want to frame these 5 nebulas in a wide with a wide lens, you need to keep the 3 stars of the Orion belt in the middle of your frame or slightly towards the left of your frame. That's how you mark something like a star which you can see with your naked eyes, and then you go from there. It's also known as star hopping, which is popularly used in visual astronomy, but we also use that in astrophotography. Now, choosing the shutter speed. Like I mentioned, there are 3 elements in your camera that you want to control in manual mode. That is your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. So how you choose the shutter speed? So if you're not tracking, if you're not using an equatorial mount, the best way is to do it via the rule of 500 or the NPF rule. NPF is just a stricter version of rule of 500. It works better, but rule of 500 works just fine. So how do you find out your shutter speed? And also why you need to choose a shutter speed? Because Unless you're shooting star trail, you want to avoid star trail. You want your stars to appear a perfect round in your image. So you want to avoid star trails. So in order to avoid star trails, we use the rule of 500, that is 500 divided by the effective focal length of your setup. So for example, if you're using, I'm going to give an example with an 18 mm lens. Most of you who has a DSLR may also have an 18 to 55 mm lens. So if you're shooting an 18 mm lens and if you're using a crop sensor body, like the ones which has an APS-C sensor, the cropping factor is 1.5 for Nikon. I think I'm getting a bit technical, but yeah, the thing is actually technical. So the cropping factor is for Nikon, it's 1.5. And for Canon, it's 1.6. Again, please pardon me if I'm wrong for Canon. So if you're using an 18 mm lens, you simply multiply to find out the effective focal length. You multiply your cropping factor, that is 1.5, into your focal length, that is 18 mm. You get something like 28 for Nikon. And then you divide 500 with 28. You get something around 18, but you always want to, keep that a bit less than that. So 15 seconds would be the maximum shutter speed that you can have without having star trails. Choosing the aperture might not be an issue if you're using a phone or a kit lens, but if you're using a very fast aperture lens, you don't want to shoot at f1.8 or f2, or say if you even have higher than that, f1.4, because that introduces a lot of artifacts like coma, field distortion, chromatic aberration, a lot of things. So the lenses you might think are brilliant for daylight photography may not be the best for nighttime. So you want to stop it down to say f4, something like that. If you have a kit lens, no worry. You shoot at the maximum it allows. Then the ISO, it depends on the condition. If there is haze, there is much light pollution, if there are high clouds, then you want to keep it to a very low number. Otherwise, you can go higher. It depends everything. You want to keep checking your histogram of your camera to find the optimum settings. Then you take the multiple shots of the same objects, which we call a light frame. We do that in order to reduce noise. So there is something called an SNR value. So we take multiple shots of the same object, whatever we are shooting. We stack them with the help of a software, and that helps us to reduce the noise and increase the signal to noise ratio, or the SNR value. Now, since we're taking multiple shots, we need an intervalometer, or Nikon. Most of the models of Nikon has an inbuilt intervalometer, but for Canon shooters, you need something like a Helicon remote control, or maybe a physical intervalometer. For Nikon, you can also use SnapBridge. And you want to keep, since we are taking multiple shots, you need to keep an interval of 1 or 2 seconds, just to let your sensor and your if you're using a mirrored camera, that is a DSLR camera, there is always a mirrored shake. So whenever you take an image, the mirror opens, your sensor is exposed, and whenever the time ends, the mirror just slaps back in your camera. So there is a minor shake. You want the shake to settle down, and then you start taking the next image. And of course, always, if you're a fan of Jared Polin, as he says, I shoot raw. You always want to keep shooting raw images, because that's the uncompressed file. If you have a 14-bit or a 12-bit or whatever the highest it allows you to shoot in the lossless format, you want to shoot that. And some even phones allow raw files. You want to shoot raw and avoid JPEG completely, because it compresses your file, and with compression you lose a lot of data. Once you start taking the images, it's better to stand away from your tripod in order, I mean, at night, you really can't see a lot of things. So you want to just stand back and relax and maybe, let your camera do the job, and you just relax and maybe watch the night sky, watch some videos or whatever. But since you're out, I would, it would be really lovely if you just keep an eye on the sky. The last, after you're done with shooting the object, we also take some calibration frames. There are 4 types of calibration frames. I'm just discussing 3 of them. The 4th one, you may not want to do that. So dark frames, which removes the heat noise or the hot pixels. So what you need to do is cover your lens and your camera. You cover your lens with a lens cap, cover your camera in the sense the viewfinder, because there is a light leak from viewfinder. You keep the same shutter speed as you have done for your light frames. I'm just reminding, light frame is the actual object, the images that you have taken. You keep the same shutter speed, aperture, ISO of what you've done for your light frames, and then, but everything covered. These are the dark frames. So if you're shooting, say, 100 light frames, you might want to shoot, say, 30 to 40 dark frames. Bias frames, which removes the electrical noise. So which is also known as the readout noise of your camera. So whenever the picture is taken, the camera, with some electronic signal, it reads whatever data is captured. So it introduces a noise. So again, same as dark frame, you keep the same shutter speed and aperture, but you reduce the shutter speed to the highest what you have for your camera. For most of the DSLR cameras, it could be 1 of 4,000 of a second. For some advanced cameras, it could be 1/8,000 of a second. For mobile phone, you can choose whatever it's allowed. Flat frame is a bit tricky. I'm not going to go into much details, but what it does, it removes vignetting and or dust spots, whatever is there in your sensor. So it removes that. It's a bit tricky. I really don't want to discuss it here, but if you're reading it, you should get the idea. And when you're done taking all of this, you're ready to pack up and move to your home. Then comes processing. Now, processing has 2 parts. It includes pre-processing and post-processing. So within pre-processing, we first organize whatever images that we have taken with the object name and date, because we don't want to, we want the data, say, 1 or 2 years later, and we cannot find it. We do not want that. So it's better if you name the folder as your, these things are not very, I don't know, it's not very technical, but these are very small bits that that will help you to, do things in a much more easy manner, rather easier manner. And then you would also want to have separate folders for your light, dark, bias, flat, etc. Then, like I said, so we have multiple images. We have multiple light frames. We have multiple calibration frames. What we do with those? We stack them. For that, for deep sky images, we used Deep Sky Stacker. Secretor is probably one of the most popular if you're shooting Milky Way. We also have Star Stacks if you're shooting a star trail. So these are the software that we use for Windows. And for Mac, we have Linkos, we have SLS, and we have Lumilosity. But both SLS and Lumilosity are paid. So there are some ways to run Deep Sky Stacker and Sequator on Mac. I'm not aware of that, but you can always find it on the internet. For solar and lunar, the first thing that we want is to crop the images, because all these objects, since they're very small, they tend to take a very small portion of the frame. So we can, get rid of the rest of the black frame and just work with a small area. I'll show you at the end of the presentation. And then we move on to stacking those planetary images, or lunar or solar, via AutoStacker. And Registacks, we can also we use for stacking and also sharpening. Now, post-processing, so on this previous softwares like DSS, AutoStacker, and SLS, you input all the calibration frames and light frames, and you get a single image, a single stacked image, which you would want to post-process. Now, okay, post-processing is something which is very subjective, and there is no right or wrong thing to do in post-processing. These are the things that is normally you do when you're doing astrophotography, like stretching your image, making it from a linear to a non-linear state, then basic adjustments and all. But then, I mean, today probably it's not the right time to talk a lot about this, but these are the basic things that we do. And when we are getting, so you're shooting at raw, like I said previously, you're shooting at raw. You input all the images as raw in the stacking softwares, and they give you an output in TIFF. Choose TIFF. They can also give you outputs in various image files, type of image files, but you choose TIFF because it's the, again, uncompressed file format, and you would really want to keep all the data within your image. I personally use PixInsight. There are dedicated softwares like PixInsight, AstroPixel Processor, and some more, many more, which is only used for astrophotography processing, but they're paid. We can also use general processing softwares like Photoshop or Lightroom, but again, these are paid. And I do not promote piracy and all, but it's up to you. But yeah, there are some free alternatives. For example, for Photoshop, the alternative is GIMP. It does a really good job. I started with GIMP. And for Lightroom, the alternative is either raw therapy or dark therapy. I have used raw therapy for say 4 or 5 months before I shifted to Lightroom, and I found it pretty. I mean, it has much more control than Lightroom. So it's basically a bridge between Photoshop and Lightroom. Darktable is also a good alternate. And then after you're done processing, now you can go on and save it as a JPEG or PNG. If you want to print it out, if you want to share it with your friends, share it in social media. Now, okay, now we're going to come to astrophotography with mobile phone, because I'm assuming a lot of you would, want to get an idea about astrophotography with your existing gear before you want to dedicate, spend some more money for a DSLR or something. We were talking about optical phenomenon. From where I'm sitting, I can see a iridescent cloud. I'm having the urge to go up and image it, but okay, let it be for today. So this is an image that was taken by a good friend of mine, Shomit Shah, and he kindly gave me his data to process. So this is the Milky Way. So this is something that you can do with your mobile phone. Now, most of the tripods that we get in the market are for DSLRs, but there are you can buy a mobile adapter separately, and you can attach your mobile with that. Mobiles are probably more suited for Milky Way, star trails, and optical phenomena rather than dark sky. The deep sky objects, or say nebulas, because it doesn't have that reach. But you can, Milky Way is a pretty interesting thing with a landscape. It might turn out excellent. Star trails is also very popular to start with. Of course, you want to, like I mentioned before, you want to use your pro or manual mode in your camera app. You can also use some third-party apps like Gcam or Google Cam. I guess Gcam stands for Google Cam. Deep Sky Camera. Deep Sky Camera is a very popular app that has released probably last year. And it's a wonderful app. It gives you all the control that you need to do astrophotography. Again, if you're shooting with an iPhone, nightcap camera, I don't know if it's paid or not, but nightcap camera is the only way to go. Now, some of you may also have a mobile phone and also maybe a a telescope, say a Dobsonian. So what do? You can attach your mobile phone to your Dobsonian telescope, and you can take images like this. This is taken by a good friend of mine, Vasudev Chakraborty, and it's really, turned out the Jupiter was like excellent. And of course, there is more. So there are adapters that you can attach with your mobile phone to the telescope. You can image the moon, the planets, the sun. You can also use it for deep sky, but it normally doesn't turn out very good because you can't track it. You can also attach, if you have a binocular, you can also attach it to your phone, and you can take images like this. All right. So for daylight, now, like I mentioned before, we can also shoot it in broad daylight. And this is what I was talking about just before. I can say it from here. This is called an iridescent cloud or rainbow clouds. Okay, this is probably, okay, I don't know why I included it here, but it's a lunar halo and it should not be considered, but you can also capture solar halos. So in daylight photography, the main thing is to, the most obvious thing that you can photograph is the sun. And you need a dedicated solar filter for that. Saad, can you just confirm if I'm still connected? If everyone can hear me?
You are connected. So
all right.
It's fine.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So now solar photography is, I must warn you that it's pretty, there are a number of risks involved. If anything goes wrong, you might lose your everything, your equipment can get burned. Your eyes, you might lose your eyesight, and a lot of things can go wrong. So basically, you need all the equipment that we were using at night, and you need a solar filter. There are dedicated solar filters. Do buy a proper solar filter in order to stay safe, and make sure it's attached to your lens properly. Of course, do not look at the sun directly, and try observing some sunspots whenever they appear. Now, optical phenomenon, you can also look out for solar halos, rare clouds like noctilucent clouds, mammatus clouds, iridescent clouds. There are a number of solar arcs like circumzenithal arcs, rainbow, the most common one, circumhorizontal arc, supralateral, and a number of things. So, if you want, you can also photograph in daylight. And so that's about it. And in astrophotography, we do not say best of luck or good wishes. We say clear skies, because that's probably the best wish that you can get. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, that's it from my side with the presentation. Okay, Saad.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me now. Okay.
Yeah, you can go ahead with the other part.
Okay. So before we take some questions, I'm going to show you a few little things. For example, a few rather samples. So this is an image, a single image of an object. Here, I guess, if you can see, this is the Andromeda galaxy. This is a bright star, Merak, at the middle. And I don't know if you can, I can't see it very properly, but this is the Triangulum galaxy or the M33. So as you can see that we do not have much detail in a single image. And if we want to process, this is an unedited image. I've just converted it from RAW to JPEG without applying anything to it. So you can consider it straight out of camera. So this is how it looks like, a single light frame or a sub-exposure. Now, what we do for deep sky objects is, like I mentioned, we go to a software like Deep Sky Stacker. So here in this software, we put our light frames, that is the picture files. We put all the calibration frames like darks, flats. There is also something called dark flat, which is a dark frame for your flat files. And then there is bias frames, or also known as offset frames. So you input all of them. The software recognizes what frame it is, and then you register them. And this is just for Deep Sky Stacker. And then you stack them with the stack check pictures. It takes some time depending on the speed of your computer or the how fast it runs. It may take anywhere from half an hour to say 4, 5, 6 hours if you have a lot of frames. Now there is another very popular software which is called Sequator. I mostly use it for Milky Way because for deep sky it doesn't tend to give good results, but the idea is the same. You input your star images or the light frames. You choose a base frame because if you're not tracking, your object would tend to shift with every frame. So you choose a frame which it would align on the basis of they align all the stars. Noise images are the dark files. Vignetting images are the flat files. And then you choose the output where you want to save your file. There are some options that you can toggle with. Since this is not a tutorial, I'm not going to go into it. But whenever you have an idea of what to do here, then you can start stacking the images. And again, it would give you a single file. So I've showed a single file here. This is a single file. Now I have put around, this is the exposure of, if I'm correct, it was around 2 minutes of a single exposure. I've taken around 60 to 70 files. I stacked them together. And this is the output that Deep Sky Stacker gave. It looks horrible, but this is just the pre-processed image. So here you can see the Andromeda galaxy. This is Mirac, this bright star. This is Mirac. And where is Triangulum? I'm still trying to find Triangulum. Let's see where it is. Okay, I can't find Triangulum. Okay, yeah, here it is. Very faint because that is why post-processing is one of the most important part to do. So for post-processing, I tend to use Deep Sky Stacker, PixInsight, which is a dedicated thing. This is the DSS output. Just by doing an auto stretch, we get something like that. And you'll see, the first time I saw, it's a magic. This is known as the automatic background extraction. You want to subtract your background from the image. Just toggle it here. It will run its course, and we're going to get another image. And let's see how that turns out to be. All right. So this is the output of the ABE or the automatic background extractor, and let's see how it has turned out. Now we see something. Now we see something. Yeah. So this is the Andromeda galaxy. Now you can see it properly, I guess. Yeah. This is the Andromeda galaxy. Mirac stays where it was. You have also found a star cluster. I don't know the name of this. And this is the Triangulum galaxy. Now we can see its, the spiral arms and all. So, post-processing is something which would give you the data. I'm not going to, again, this is not a tutorial. These are some of the processes that I tend to use depending on the image. There are many more. And after all the processing is done in PixInsight, I get this image. And now you can completely avoid PixInsight. You can also do it in Photoshop. You can watch many tutorials. So, but this is not my final output. I tend to then save it as a TIFF file from, like I said, you want to save it as uncompressed. Then I move on to Photoshop, and this is my final image. So here we see the Triangulum galaxy, the M33, if I'm not wrong. All the spiral arms, you can see Andromeda and some of the nebular dusts. No, these are not nebulas, but the dusts within the galaxy. Oh, you can see a lot more actually. We can see this is a satellite galaxy. I think it's M110. And believe it or not, this is also another galaxy, which is M32. Andromeda is known as M31 or Messier 31. And the star cluster that we had shown before. So this is normally my workflow. I stack with Deep Sky Stacker. I then process initially with PixInsight. Then I move on to Photoshop to render the final image. Now, just for an example purpose, a lunar image. Now, this is a single image straight out of camera, no editing done. It was taken at 600 mm. So this is how it looks pretty good. I mean, you can process it, you can get some amazing results with this, but still we stack the images and we stack the images. Oh no, like I said, in case of lunar thing, lunar, solar, or planetary, we first tend to crop the images. So this is PEEP, the software that I use for cropping. I input all the files here, the light frames. You can also input darks, flats, and flat darks. You do not get a lot of readout noise, so we do not use bias frames for planetary. And we get output. So for per one light frame, we get one output from PIP. Let me show you here. Yeah, okay. This is the PIP output. So you can see this is much more cropped. So the large area we had initially, this black area, we have got rid of those black areas. Now you're just working with this. This reduces the file size. It helps you concentrate on this particular object, and also, reduces the stress on your computer. After we get, say, you have taken 100, 200 images of the moon with PEEP output, you get all those 100 or 200 images. Then the time is now to stack it. For planetary, I personally use auto stacker to stack the images. Okay. Yeah. To input all the files, you do all those settings, you toggle them, and then you stack the image. And let's see what output can we get from here. Yeah. this is the auto staggered output. It doesn't look pretty good from here, but there is a lot of data in it. And then finally I go to Photoshop for all the tweaking, and this is something, the final image that we get. This is also known as the mineral moon, because we turn out to extract some of the colors of the lunar surface. Lunar surface do have a lot of colors, like this blue areas, which is rich in titanium. These are iron rich areas and all. So yeah, again, since this is not a tutorial, there is no point of showing how I do it. There are a lot of number of videos on YouTube that you can watch and learn. So I guess, yeah, I guess that's it from my side. I mean, there is really nothing much that I can show from here. Yeah, Saad, I think that's it. Can we take some questions? If there are any questions.
Sure, we can take up. There were a few questions in chat, but I answered most of them. If there is any more, any other question, you can put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Or else you can raise your hand and ask it verbally. I guess there are none.
Oh wow, was it that boring?
What telescope is best for beginners?
Well, that's a very I don't know how to answer that. You cannot do a lot of things with a single telescope. The first thing that you need to do is to find out your subgenre of astrophotography. If you're more interested into planets, sun, the moon, then a Dobsonian, 8-inch, 10-inch, whatever money you're ready to spend on it. If you're more into capturing nebulas, galaxies, especially nebulas, you might want a refractor. Maybe you can start small with, say, 70 to 80 mm of aperture. If you have the money, you can go to 150 mm. But remember, with those, the higher focal length you go, you cannot keep your setup simple. You would need a tracker in order to get good images. And but I think Dobsonians are the best because it's cheap. You can get a good quality Dobsonian even in 20, 25, 30,000 rupees. Refractors tend to be a lot more expensive if you want good glass. So you can, of course, start with a Dobsonian. Then, if you want to go advanced, you can put an equatorial platform on that. So your answer, I don't know if I can answer it in one word, but yeah, a Dobsonian would be my choice if I want to begin. Do we have anything else?
Next one is like, where can we click good photos?
Where can we click good photos?
I guess that goes with the bottle system.
Okay. So you would need a dark sky. You can of course shoot from all the images that you've seen in the presentation are taken from my home, that is in Kolkata, which is a heavily light polluted city, and I also live close to the airport, so you can understand. But if you want a better quality image, if you want to start out in astrophotography, you might want to find a dark sky. You can take a look at the light pollution map website. There it will show you the bottle scales. The lower it is, the better it is. There are some bottle 4-5 areas in all the states. Even if you're in a rural area, you are probably living in a bottle 4-5. If you're living in a hilltop area or in a hilly city, you're probably living in a bottle 3. There are some bottle 2 areas. Bottle 1 area, probably a handful. Hanle is one of them, which is in Ladakh, and I don't know others, but yeah. Basically, you need to find a dark sky if you want to get good data, but otherwise you're good to go from anywhere.
Excuse me, sir.
Are any special lens or filters required to start? Like I said, you can start with whatever you have. If you have just a DSLR and a kit lens, you start with that. Yes, there are a number of lenses which are specifically for astrophotography. I mean, not specifically for astrophotography, but they give very good performance, like the Samyang 135, the primes, the 35-50 primes, if you want to shoot wide field. For filters, I don't know, the choice is hard. You can have the light pollution filters that are sold, do not work. If you want to get a good light suppression filter, or also known as LPS, light pollution suppression filter, there are a few brands like Optilong, Astrodon, and stuff like that, which are dedicated to astrophotography. They sell some filters, and if you go advanced, if you're shooting with a dedicated astro camera, then you can go with narrowband filters like hydrogen alpha, sulfur, oxygen. If you're shooting broadband targets, then you can go with RGB filters. But at the beginning, you really don't need a filter. And if you really need, you can get an LPS filter from those dedicated astrophotography brands, and not like those from Hoya or Nisi, which are mainly for general photography purpose.
So Medip, I had to make an announcement basically. After that,
Sure.
we can continue with the question. So by the way, we would be releasing an amateur astrophotography competition as well. And you'll receive a mail for it. And along with that, we'll also share the recording of the workshop. Also, on our Discord server, we have created a specific channel for astrophotography. I will put in the details in the chat, so you can even ask or share your stuff there. So yeah, we can continue with the questions if there are any.
Yeah. Okay, did I miss any? Well, I actually broke my telescope eyepiece and have spent a year searching online. Still haven't found nothing online. Since we can get supplementary spare parts, not many, good sites. For main parts, I don't know. Which brand is it is from? Is it Celestron or? Basically, if you want an eyepiece, you can look for. There are some sites in India like tejraj.com. Okay, it's Celestron. I don't know if Tejraj sells Celestron parts, but you can try with Tejraj. You can talk to the owner. There are also some other sites like yeah. Somebody has already put in the link. There are also some other websites like Go Scientifics, Galileo Telescopes, Cosmioscope. So these are the main astrophotography equipment websites that you can get in India, but you can always import it from foreign, like First Light Optics, Egina Astro, and other websites. If we just want to start out with mobile, any mandatory setup which, okay, I haven't shot with mobile. I do not use my mobile. The setup, like I mentioned, you just need a tripod. That's it. I mean, that is all you need if you want to shoot with your mobile. You don't need anything else.
Granth, you can unmute and ask.
Yeah. So my question was that what is the minimum amount of pictures we need to take for different type of astrophotography?
Granth, can you please repeat that?
Yeah. So what is the minimum amount of photographs that we need to take for different types of photography genres?
Okay. See, it depends. It depends on your sky condition. If you're so it doesn't really depend on the number of photographs that you take, but it really depends on the total integration time. So what we understand with the total integration time is, for example, the image that I'd shown of the Andromeda galaxy, each image was of, the shutter speed was of 2 minutes or 120 seconds. I had taken around 60 images. So my total integration time was around 2 hours. 60 into 2 minutes, which is 2 hours. So, if you're using a tracker, you can take longer single exposures and take less number of images. There is no good number. I mean, I have seen people taking 20 minutes of exposures altogether, say 20 images of 1 minute, and get amazing results. I've seen people having a total exposure time of, say, 150 or 200 hours on a single object. Of course, that is mind-blowing image details. But if you're shooting untracked, for example, Milky Way, you're shooting untracked, you're getting a single exposure of 15 seconds, you might want to take 50 to 60 light frames at least. The more you take, the more better.
Okay, so if we have a tripod, then we should take photographs with less shutter speed and more number of photographs.
Exactly.
So to avoid the trails.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Do you have any other questions? How to click multiple images to stack them? Like I mentioned, I mean, you can take it with your intervalometer. You can, set up your intervalometer, how many images you want to take. When you're using an intervalometer, you want to set your camera, if you're using a DSLR, of course, you want to set your shutter speed to bulb. So whenever you cross 30 seconds is the most that you can take with your camera. When you cross that, you see a mode called bulb. You put your camera on the bulb mode, you switch on your intervalometer or your, if you're using an app like Helicon Shutter or SnapBridge, you put the interval, you put the exposure time, say 15 seconds, then you put the interval. So the interval would be 2 seconds more than the shutter speed. So if your shutter speed is 15 seconds, you want to keep your interval at 17 seconds. So after taking the first image, you would take an interval of 2 seconds. And then you choose the number of images that you want to click, say 30, 40, 50, and then you start. And the camera will do everything for you. Then you save it and you stack it. What an intervalometer. Okay, intervalometer is something, yeah, it needs to be purchased separately, but just check if your camera, if you're using a Nikon, check if your camera has an inbuilt intervalometer. Intervalometer is a small remote-like device, a very small thing, which has a screen where you can, set up basically all these things that I talked about. Do we have any other questions? Right. Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So is it required to have high resolution sensors for clicking high definition images of moons and planets?
Is there any?
So is there any requirement for high resolution sensors?
See, the more you spend, the more advanced your equipment is, the better images that you get. But I mean, in scientific observatories, they use high resolution CCD cameras. Then there are dedicated astro cameras. But a DSLR is enough. Like a lot of astrophotographers, they just image with their DSLR, and that's it. if you have a good DSLR, then it's good. If you have a basic level DSLR like I have, it's good to go.
So if I want to image moon, but I don't have a high focal lens, so can I do it with a 55 millimeter?
Of course, you can shoot the moon with 55, but you're not going to get the, say, the craters, the surface details. For surface details of the moon or the sun, you need at least a focal length of 200 mm or above. So you can always buy a 70 to 300 lens, even if it's used. I've done a lot of lunar imaging with that lens, the kit 70 to 300. I think that's a good lens to start with. But with 18 to 55, no, it won't be as such a lunar image. It would just be the moon and something else together.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. Do we have any other person? If you have any questions.
I guess we can end it here now.
All right. So if you have any further questions, I mean, if you want to do anything else, if you want any help or suggestion, I'll of course try my best, to the best of my ability to help you out. You can always send me an email to my email ID, which is samadipmukherjeephotos@gmail.com. You can also send me a DM on my Instagram, which is samadipmukherjeephotos. And you can have your questions or whatever you need over there. And I can always try to help you out.
So